I mean, I would love for Grace and Frankie to be like, okay, so what is the need underneath this preference? I mean, that would have been kind of cool.
Oh, that sounds like it would be totally up Frankie's
I mean,
alley,
I can
too.
imagine Frankie doing this, totally. Hello, 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 and welcome to Well Shit. It really is that simple. I'm Claire.
And I'm Serena. On this podcast, we help you to understand about your 12 universal needs, why they are currently not being well met,
how to meet them in ways that work for you, and how to consistently do so in quick, easy, and simple ways that fit seamlessly into your life.
We'll also help you to understand how doing so will have a positive ripple effect in literally every area of your life.
If you like what you hear, sign up for more support with meeting your needs with your weekly Universal Needs notes at theuniversalneeds.com.
And enjoy the show.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, everyone.
It's very busy here right now. Very, very busy.
It's always very busy
right
here.
Yeah, that's true.
Right here.
It's very
always
busy
here right now, whenever now is.
I mean, every now's a now.
Or was it? That now is a then.
I mean, and the one to come is going to be a then as well until it's a now. Okay, this is not a good way to start a podcast. like I can imagine someone listening going, the fuck are they talking about now? I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, you're probably used to saying that with us now. The reason it's busy here right now is I'm in the process of packing and moving. So there's boxes. It's really cool, actually, because the fact that you probably can't tell it goes to show the strategy in which I'm packing this place up. Like, this room to my left is stacked with boxes. The kitchen, which is sort of just back there, is stacked with boxes, but we've kind of been strategic in making sure that this area stays box free just for the moment while we
What is that? I wanted to say palatable to the eye, but palatable is something that is to your taste buds. Pleasing, the other P word. Pleasing to the eye.
The other P word, like there's only two.
There's only two.
There's only two. Wow. I mean, English lessons by Serena.
Do not follow that course. You will probably fail not fail in life, because I'm doing pretty well. I just don't use the correct words.
It'll be an interesting course, that's for sure. As someone who's learning another language right now anyway, I'm like, I can just imagine, like, it's hard enough, but I mean, it would be much easier if they were like, just two P words. I'm like, awesome.
I'm going to blame this one on Joe, because we actually, when we first got together, we had a really close, or we still have these close friends, but we were very close with them, like daily interactions, and we came up with this thing called Joeisms, because Joe would make up words that had no existence in the human language, and they kind of made sense, and you were like,
we've talked about Joeisms on previous podcasts, I'm sure,
and it's like
that does, yeah, I can
kind of piece it together. It doesn't make it right or an actual word, but
then all words were made up at some point.
True.
So I mean, if they make sense, then I think that we should just can we put Joe in charge of the dictionary? That would be fun. Like, yeah.
Here's a project for you. Make it your own.
It's gonna go places.
Instead of Webster's, it's Setzer's. If you see the Setzer's dictionary, either get some entertainment value out of it or move on.
I mean, that could be quite a cool thing to do, like just as a project, like create your own dictionary. Like, there's Urban Dictionary, there could be Joe's Dictionary. Like, I mean, and it would be entertaining to read.
So entertaining.
I mean, I think it needs to capture all of these Joeisms and then release a Setzer's dictionary. Watch this space, folks.
No.
Fun things to come.
No, because you know what? You don't have to sit there and listen to all the definitions. It's kind of like the dad joke factor. I got Joe last year. I got him a page a day calendar, and it was dad jokes. And about January 2nd, I regretted my decision. So by December 31st, I was like, no more jokes. So I had to listen to them, every single one. And he's like, hi, it's funny. And I'm like,
So this year she gets a paper airplane thrown at her face every year, every day.
You think you're kind of joking.
Oh no, I know I'm not.
Last night I was sitting there and he's like, look at this new one. Boop, right in the middle of my head. And I mean, in his defense, I saw where he was aiming, which was nowhere near me in general, but it had like a loop-de-loop. It's about we're on January 13th. I'd say it's about the 5th plane that I've gotten directly in the face.
There was one the other day where it like literally booped you on the end of your nose.
Yeah, it came to my nose and it was like, boop, drop. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, I know you didn't intend that, but like, this isn't the trade I was thinking of with the dad joke. I realized there was going to be airplanes all over the place, but in my face,
I didn't realize this was going to be target practice.
Right?
Oh my god! And the good thing is, this hasn't created a conflict so far.
Yeah.
See what I did there? Nice little segue in. Watch this space, Joe. I mean, like, watch out for the planes. If not, there may be a conflict. But the good thing is you're going to have this series, so you'll know how to deal with it. Ta-da! So today we are on episode number 3 of our conflict series. And this is about how do we resolve conflicts. So we've talked a little bit about this already in the first 2 episodes, but this is about like 3 specific strategies. There's actually 4. We've got a secret bonus one a little bit later. Like secret bonus. It's not that exciting. I mean,
it really is.
It's good. It's important information, but not necessarily that exciting. Not something we want to be celebrating. Or sometimes we will. You'll be revealed. So you'll understand what the hell are they talking about. It'll make sense soon, hopefully. So we're talking about 3 specific strategies that help when you are talking about resolving conflicts. And these are things that we use on a regular basis. Because as we talked about in the first episode of this series, conflict isn't just the big things. It's not the World War III's. It's these small little things where when we are, because we're all human beings and different things meet our needs, is that by existing around each other, we're going to end up compromising or impacting other people's needs, not intentionally, not severely, but that our presence sometimes, like literally being around people, can cause to like drain to their energy. So it's like there's going to be conflicts of needs that are going to happen when 2 people spend a lot of time together, whether that's intimate relationship, whether that is family relationships, friendships, work relationships. My mind went completely blank in the middle of that. I'm like,
I had you. I was like,
you're ready to jump in. I like that. I'm obviously young, and you knew where I was going with it. So, irrespective of these relationships and like where we're at, we're going to end up with needs conflicts at times, where something that one person wants is going to conflict with what the other person wants, and vice versa. So it really is helpful to kind of get into the habit of using these 3 tools. Like this is kind of like the next step on from what we were talking about in the last episode. So anything you want to say before we kind of dive on into the little techniques?
Are you going to go over what the 3 are ahead of time?
No.
Or okay,
I'm going to review them afterwards. But
okay. Just making sure.
Okay, go on.
We're good.
Give the spoiler. I mean, it's in the name of it's in the title of the podcast. So go ahead.
Well, just for me, I like to know up front. But the 3 times
I'm doing really well at not telling people what we're talking about.
I know, she's trying to be all coy.
Just
like, keep listening to find out. I'm just going to tell you up front. The 3 main ones.
She's not going to tell you the little bonus.
No, I'm going to keep the bonus a secret. The 3 that we're going to talk about today are coping, closing, and co-creating. And those are 3 ways to resolve conflict.
Right. And they're 3 tools that you can use. And it's important to say that these are things that you can use all of them. You could use one of them. You can use, like, depending on the circumstance. Ideally, you want to be using at least 2 of them in every single conflict situation. Sometimes you might need the second one. You might need the closing to help you reach the co-creating part. But ideally, you want to be doing both coping and co-creating in every conflict situation. And sometimes if those don't work, that's when you're going to get to the secret bonus one. So let's talk about the first one. So coping with conflict is basically about meeting your own needs in the context of the conflict in order that you stay supported and resourced. The thing is that what tends to happen is, this is probably not going to come as news to you, but meeting your needs generally is a good idea.
What?
I know. I mean, shock.
Well, shit.
So generally we want to be meeting our needs because as we've spoken about, we've talked about this, we've spoken about or talked about the Star Trek shields a lot in previous episodes, where by meeting our needs, we make sure that the ship is in good condition and that we have our shields up, so that if stuff comes our way, that it ends up impacting the shields and not the ship itself. So generally speaking, we want to make sure that we are meeting our needs, because we are going to be more resourced to cope with any conflict that comes up ahead of time. And this is something that's really, really helpful to understand when it comes to needs, which is that, like, when we talk about coping, a lot of people do this reactively to a situation. So coping is doing things in the moment to meet your needs in order to stay resourced in the situation. So when something has impacted you, it's that checking in, figuring out what need has been impacted and doing something to meet that need in the moment. Now, a lot of people have said they do this reactively. So it's like, oh, this thing has happened and it's impacted this need. I'm going to now do this thing to meet that need again, so I get resourced again. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That is a very helpful approach to take. And you can do this proactively, so that you can proactively meet your needs, so that your ship is in good condition, your shields are at 100%. Because if your shields are at 10% and you have a conflict, okay, maybe the shields are going to go down to 0. Well, if you get them back to 10%, well, they're still only at 10%, which means another hit's going to take them out again. Whereas if you proactively meet them ahead of time, you're already going to have 100% shields, which means you can take far more impacts before the ship actually gets hit. So you're going to take far more impacts before you actually feel your needs being compromised to the same extent, and where it's going to have the same impact on your system and your actions and your behavior. So
I want to say that the needs practice that we teach in our unlimited refills program that's how Claire and I make sure that our shields are up before we even start our day. You do your needs practice, and it's like, okay, I've met my needs, so I'm at 100%, or if you're even lower, 80%, wherever it is, it's more than what you would have had when you walked out the door without doing the practice. Right. So, I mean, these little tool. Thank you. I was like, trick. It's not really a trick, but the tools that we use, that's how we do this on a daily basis, to make sure it's like, all right, whatever's going to happen today, it's okay, because I'm at least
I've got some resource
to this point.
It's like the difference. I mean, the first thing I will say also is that, like, that practice takes between 5 and 15 minutes. Like, it's not it doesn't take a long time to do. And the other thing, it's a little bit like if you imagine getting into your car and like seeing that the gas tank, like the gas light is on.
That never happens to me all the time.
I was going to say, really? Like, I thought you were serious for a second there. No. Like, that happens a lot in my world too.
Yeah, no, I'll drive. I'll be like, there's like 15 gallons in the reserve. There's also not 15 gallons in the reserve.
But the thing is, like, how do you feel when you're going, like, I know for myself, I don't really drive that much here. So, I mean, I might go to the grocery store. Like now, I mean, at one point I was driving a lot to go to see massage therapists or go for training or what have you. Recently, I haven't been doing a lot of those things because our massage therapist left town. Boo, come back, Kelly. Realize this is going to be like months down the line. She's going to be like, now you asked for this.
Well, she's coming back next week.
That's
so
true.
by the time it happens, it will be long past due. Come back, Kelly.
And so I don't drive that much, which is why I'm not kind of very focused on fuel, but I know how I drive when the gas light is on, and I know I'm low. I'm like, it's on my mind all the time. Versus if I've got a full tank, I'm not even thinking about it. It doesn't even occur to me, and like how it feels to not have one other thing on your plate. And if your needs are unmet, if your needs are compromised, you're already going to be low on resources, which means that chances are things are going to hit you harder. They're going to have the impact is going to be amplified to what it would be if you were already resourced. So you can cope, as in, like, you can pre-cope by making sure your needs are already resourced ahead of time. And then in the actual situation, when you are in the conflict, as we've spoken about, you can take that moment to pause. Which needs, feel how you're feeling. Like, I think it's really important to say, like, when you're in the feels, chances are you're not going to be thinking straight. So it's okay to take a moment to breathe and feel how you're feeling. and wait for your brain to start operating again. Take some deep breaths. Some deep breaths will support and tone your vagus nerve. Maybe do some VU breathing if you're in a situation where that feels like it's an option that would be helpful. Again, to support your vagus nerve, which is going to reduce the stress response. It's going to implement your rest and digest. It's going to lower your blood pressure. It increases your resilience to stresses. All these sorts of things. So taking a few deep breaths will allow you to kind of get into the point where, okay, you're going to be able to start thinking again. It's okay to take a moment for that to happen. You don't have to do this immediately. It's like, oh, I've been hit. No, immediately I need to think about my needs and everything. It's like, no, allow yourself to be human. Allow yourself to feel how you feel, and then take that moment to pause and like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is like, and it really is like, if you've been in this situation, like you'll tend to find that you're kind of tense because there's like that defensive thing of like, oh, I've been impacted, like your defenses kind of come up. And like when you kind of go through the needs, you're like, okay, this need, that need, that need. Oh, like, and like your body relaxes as you go through them, and that's how you can tell that you're no longer in that reactive defensive space. You're coming from a more internally resourced place.
I have to say, deep breathing, like my go-to, we've talked about it before, not in meeting your needs. Even with us, it doesn't work the same way every time. Like what met my security need yesterday may not meet my security need today.
Or may not meet your security need as well today.
Yes. Yeah. So it's very important to not necessarily get into the habit of doing it the same way every time. Really check into what you're feeling and what you need in that moment and what would feel really good in that moment.
Right.
I do have a general stop, pause, deep breathe for me, then I ground myself.
Right.
Like those three things have never yet
wavered,
failed me. Like it always makes me a little bit more resource to do those three things.
Right.
Even if like that's kind of my go-to, like if I'm in a conflict, it's like, all right, pause, breathe. All right, I'm going to feel the support of what's underneath me. Let me ground myself for a minute. And then I check in.
Right.
Like that's part of my process. I do that. And then I check in because I'm like, those three things are going to feel good no matter what to me. And then I'm going to go back and be like, all right, is my foundation function need up? Actually, no, that kind of took care of that. Or like, yeah, actually, I'm really dehydrated too. I'm going to take a sip of water because then I'm not thinking about how thirsty I am on top of this, whatever it is. Right. But like, I tend to see people get into a cycle of doing the same things. They're like, well, this is what I do because this is what works. And it's like, does it work as well as it could?
Well, and I think there are two really important elements to what Serena's just said. There's your default thing that you're going to do. And that is something that when you're not able to think straight, that it gives you something that you know is going to be supportive to you. So that is your stopping, breathing, grounding, like for Serena. Like for me, it's very similar actually. I like a lot of the time I'll pause, I'll take a few deep breaths, I'll feel how I'm feeling, and I'll ground. Like there's like some variation of those things. And when you kind of go through the needs, you're like, okay, so the deep breathing is actually going to support my foundation function. It's going to support my security. It's going to emotional expression, like the grounding, it's security. Like there's like very much we're focusing on the roots of the tree and the things that we're doing at that time. So there's the default.
It's kind of interesting how you have that extra needs step in there where I'm like, I need to get to the point where I can think, because the next thing for me is the emotional experience and expression where it's like, okay, what am I actually feeling about this now that I can kind of focus on it?
Yeah.
But it just kind of shows the path of the journey. It's like she's able to immediately be like, all right, this is my default, and put that extra layer on it, where me, I'm like, I just need to get through those first three, and then usually I can take the next step.
Well, and I think that because of where I'm at in terms of the process, I've got the capacity normally to feel what's present, whereas you need those steps to be able to have the capacity to feel what's present. So it's like,
and that's okay.
Yeah,
we're
absolutely.
still getting to the same spot eventually.
There's no right way of doing this. But I think that's, and Serena's right. Like if you're just doing the same thing every time without thinking about it for the whole thing, then chances are you're probably not giving yourself the best support. And at the time when you cannot think straight, you want your go-tos. What are the things that I'm going to do when I'm not thinking? That will be the same every time, because you know that they're going to offer support. And then once you've got enough support for your brain to be able to function in the same way, because like when we're in conflict, when we're experiencing a trauma response, different parts of our brain activate. And when we're feeling certain things, different parts of our brains activate. And those are not necessarily the parts of the brain that are very helpful when it comes to like cognitive functioning and logically figuring out what's going on. So we might need these things to be able to get to that point. And then once our brain is kind of clicked in again, it's like, okay, now I can think, right, now what do I need in this moment, in this situation, in this moment that's going to support me best? And that's one of those times where it's like, okay, that point, I go through the tree from the roots up, like what need? Is it this one? No. Is it this one? Yes. Oh, I have a bit of this. Okay, and then is it this one? Is this up? No. But that one's up. So okay, now I'm going to do this. So it's like there's things that we can do in that process to support ourselves, both in terms of doing the same thing without thinking about it, because at that point we probably can't think. And then once I can think, what am I going to do that's specific to this moment in this situation?
Like, once you can think, then you can climb the tree.
Right, absolutely.
Because you start from the bottom, and it's like,
well, once you can think, you realize there's a tree there. Because before that point, the tree's out the fucking window. Like it's like, tree, what tree? And it's like right now I'm just in a cluster of emotion and stuff, and that's where that stop, breathe, ground / emotions. What am I feeling?
That's like putting the ladder. It's like, okay, now I realize there's a tree. All right, let me put the ladder up to the tree, or
figure out like now let's start looking at like taking care of the tree from the ground up, because it's like we don't necessarily want to be climbing it, but the tree, we are the tree. So it's like what do our roots need? What does this root need? What does that root need? What does the trunk need? What does this part of the trunk need? So it's like it's like taking care of ourselves from the root up. It's like it's almost like you got a watering can but it's focused on like what does this part of the tree need? What does that part of the tree need? What does this part of the tree need? It's like your complete multivitamin for your entire tree. But that's kind of what it's like. I mean, it really is from a needs point of view. So the first thing we want to do, the first tool that is really helpful in conflict is coping. Whether that is proactively setting us up to be able to cope better with these situations because we are already resourced, or in the moment being able to re-resource ourselves in the relevant to what has been impacted by the conflict that we're in that moment. So that's the first one. Second one isn't always necessary, but can be incredibly helpful. Now, this step we call closing. Now, when we say closing, it's a temporary closing. This is not about completely closing it down, but it's about making sure that we are taking the moments when we need them to pause the situation, to walk away from the situation, to put our boundaries in the situation. And we need to make sure that we kind of come back to it afterwards. But this is where, like, Serena's spoken about this on previous podcast episodes, where it's like, okay, so we're in this situation right now. Hold on a second. I need a moment to be able to process. It may be that if you've got such an intensity of emotion going on inside of you that you need to take a moment to go and process that emotion before you're going to be able to co-create from a meaningful place. You might need a little more of a moment to go and take care of your needs before you can then co-create with somebody else. So it's about taking that moment to be able to momentarily close the situation in order that it supports. Now, the key thing is there's a difference here between closing the situation to support the resolution and closing it as an avoidance strategy. Very, very different things. Now, if you are, we're going to do a podcast episode coming up on the on attachment theory and the different attachment styles and how they relate to the needs and ways of securing your attachment style, which is an interesting and very much appreciated side consequence that I was not expecting from doing this work. But bonus, we'll take it. One of the go-tos of the avoidant attachment style is to close as a way of avoiding. Shocking that the avoidant strategy. What?
Did the skies just
I-
open up, or
I don't know whether the sky's opened up yet. I don't
Holy
know
crap.
that it's actually raining yet, but it just got really dark here all of a sudden.
and like really, it's almost like pre-hurricane window.
Yes,
back,
there's-
so.
it got very weird. I was thinking the same thing. I'm
Like-
like, is this something you've seen that I haven't?
No, I was trying to stay focused, and then I'm just like, are we in end times? Is this is what this is? Like,
I really hope not. We got plans tonight.
I
Like-
know. Well, and that's the other thing. I'm like, oh. All
and
right.
it's also an open air thing tonight, so we're really hoping that it's not problematic.
Apparently
in
it's a
that
wet t-shirt party.
Well, good thing the t-shirts,
They're not
the band
white.
t-shirts are thick and
Yeah.
not white, so we'll be good. Although I will be cold, so I don't want that. Anyway,
Back to the topic.
back to the topic at hand. There is a difference. As I said, like shocker that that this is a avoidance strategy of the avoidant attachment style.
Just trying to give myself a little more. I feel like I'm like in the cover of darkness. all of a
Right?
sudden.
Like I've got a little extra light next to me, so I don't have to worry about it. It was like what you didn't see off camera was like one of the lights all of a sudden started moving towards me. I'm like, well, this is new. We'll rearrange the furniture. Wow, it's got really
dark.
windy all of a sudden. Oh well, hopefully it'll be a quick in, quick out, and clear before
Plans.
this evening's plans. So anyway, so yeah, as I said, shock horror. That this is a technique that's used as an avoidance strategy by the avoidant attachment style. But this tends to happen where it's like the walking away is, I want to avoid dealing with this.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that, you actually, we talked about it in the, I think it was in the last episode when we were talking about the steps of the apology with the acting to avoid further harm. By just walking away and trying to not having to deal, not wanting to deal with this, you actually cause further harm because you leave the other person in a situation where they're feeling abandoned, rejected, like they're on their own. They can't resolve a situation between two people single-handedly. So it's like so it's very important that there is a mindfulness in how this is done, that this is not just I'm pissed off, so I'm walking away, or I don't want to deal with you right now, so I'm walking away. The walking away, or the setting of a boundary, or the requesting of space, or the requesting of time needs to be as an intentional act to be able to get to a resolution as quickly as possible. So if you come at it from that point of view of like, okay, I need a moment to process so that I'm going to be in the best state of mind for us to complete this conversation. Now, the important thing is that if you're doing this, it needs to be followed up by a co-creation or the bonus option that will come in a minute. The second thing, as we spoke about in the last episode, is that if you are going to do this, you need to manage expectations and communicate about what you are doing, why you are doing it, and how long, importantly, you're going to be doing it for. And also, if you are the one who is walking away, it's really important that you are the one who comes back, that you re-engage the conversation, because if the other person has to, and this is what tends to happen with avoidant and anxious attachment styles, is the avoidant walks away and then the anxious needs it to be resolved, so they move towards, and the avoidant moves away and they move towards, and like that's a very common pattern that happens with those particular two attachment styles. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we will do another podcast episode on this. If you Google attachment styles, you'll get a pretty good idea. But just as a starting place, and we'll get into it from the needs context further on. But it's really important to make sure that you communicate what you're doing, why you're doing it, how long you're doing it, and that you come back and re-engage after that period of time. Now, it may be, as we said in a previous episode, that actually that period of time hasn't been long enough, and you come back and say, look, I know I said I would come back after 10 minutes. I actually need a little bit longer because I'm mid-process, I'm making progress, and I'll be back in like 5 minutes. But I wanted to let you know so you weren't waiting on me. So it's that communication on how this is done, and communicating that you are doing this because you want to resolve the situation. Not, I don't give a shit what works for you right now. I need space, so I'm going to take it. It's that I want to work this out with you, and I want you to know that this is something I need in order to be effective in doing that. That makes all the difference.
And it's coming, like if you're on the not walking away side of the conflict, make sure that you're very kind of aware that if somebody is doing that, they're not doing the, I said 5 minutes, now it's going to be 10, now it's going to be a day. Like, there has to be some actual work being done, because I know people who have used the closing as an avoidance technique, and then they avoid it more, and then they avoid it more, and then they avoid it more, because they just don't want to deal with it. And it a lot of times it is unconscious, and they're like, I don't have the capacity to do this right now. And it's like, at some point you have to realize, if you are the person walking away, there needs to be progress. Mm-hmm. Like, it can't just be avoided until you have the time, the space, the capacity. And yes, you have to be mindful of that.
Right.
But the world of adulting, like, there's always going to be something else that comes in. So it does, there needs to be a realistic aspect.
And I'm going to say that's actually the responsibility of the person walking away. And the person who isn't walking away, you get to hold someone accountable if they are doing that. Like, it's okay to communicate that and call somebody in if that's what's going on. The other thing I will say is, if you are the person who is not needing the space, and a lot of the times in these situations, that is rain.
It is rain.
Yeah. Like, that came in hot. Wow. So a lot of the time in those situations, what's happening is that one person wants space, the other one doesn't want space. They want to talk. One person needs time, and the other one's like, no, let's get it done now. It's okay that you feel how you feel about the fact that they want space. It's so important to be like, it's one of the things that happens a lot in these situations is that people bypass their own needs because they intellectually understand that the other person has needs, and that's what they need in that situation. You can understand what's going on and why they need space and still feel a kind of way about it. Like, you can still have feelings about it. And while they're taking space, you can process those feelings. Like, I've done that. I've done some good old journaling when somebody's needed some space. I wouldn't want to go back and read those journals again, I'm going to be honest. I processed a lot of anger. Another great one was, I used to have like a 6-foot memory foam bean bag, which is super comfy, by the way. It was like my favorite thing to sit in. It also took a pummeling at times. Like, I beat the crap out of that thing at times. I'm like, but that was me processing my anger and my frustration at the situation. So I'm processing my stuff. So I'm not bringing that into the situation, because
that's the worst, when somebody steps away, takes some time, processes it, and then they come back, and the person they've stepped away from is now like, rah!
Yes.
That does not help the conflict.
No, it doesn't. And it's, in that situation, like, it's okay to be like, and that's why the coping is really important in this situation. Because if you've stepped away and you've processed, you need to make sure you're doing the coping so you come back resourced, because the chances are the other person might be upset. And that's okay. That's a valid response. Yes, they get to process it, but it's okay for them to also want to process that with you and be like, actually, I'm really frustrated that you did that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not necessarily an attack on you. And there's a big difference between, I'm frustrated that was something that you needed, and I'm frustrated with you. Two very different things. And I will often, this has happened innumerable times with me, where something has happened, and I'll say to somebody, like, plans have changed or something, and I'll communicate and say, I'm really disappointed right now, and I'm upset because I was looking forward to doing this, and I totally understand why you need to do this. I'm not saying I want you to change it. I just need you to know how I'm feeling about it.
I feel like those kind of conversations and those incidents, like Claire just mentioned, of acknowledging with the person, like, I'm feeling this way about it, really kind of helps I don't want to say dissolve the conflict, but it makes sure that, like, they know where you're coming from. Like, when you're on the same page, it makes things a lot easier, and it makes sure there aren't layers of niggles that kind of get put down. Like, I had a situation today where a friend texted me, and some plans changed potentially completely.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, I'm feeling a certain way about this. Like, I get why. I know where they are. I know the situation. It's like, yes. And it didn't change the fact it gave me anxiety. It made me feel a little bit like a lack of consideration and all these things. So right then and there, I was like, hey, yeah, we'll figure it out. Like, like,
okay,
this is the situation at hand.
Right.
Okay. Like, this is what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling a little anxious, and this is why, and I needed to name that, because this isn't a conversation that's over. This wasn't just like, okay, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
So by me saying that, that's not whirring in my head. From the beginning, this person knows, okay, there's some feelings around this. There's some anxiety around this, and it's been named. So like if it comes up, it's like, okay, like that's probably the anxiety factor, and it just helps with understanding. It doesn't eliminate a conflict, but the understanding factor, it makes a huge difference.
Well, and also like a lot of the like the reason you were feeling the way you were feeling was there was an element of lack of consideration. And if the other person knows that's what you're feeling, chances are they'll be more considerate because they know you're feeling that way.
And
like,
then they'll take it, and like we see this all the time with the people in our lives. It's like we name it, and then it's like they come to us and randomly they'll be like, I'm feeling this way about this, and it's like, we get this little giddy like needs nurturer feeling, and it's like like, and we get happy when people come to us and they're like, I'm feeling this way about what just happened. It's like,
and it's like we're not happy that they're feeling that way. We're happy that they're communicating with us about how they feel,
because we know us taking the edge off of it for ourselves, what that feels like for us. Like it's like,
and what that does for any potential conflict and for the relationship.
And when it comes to closing, I want to mention another thing. A lot of times people have, like, once they're in it, they're like, okay, we're in it. We have to finish this. It has to be done now. Like, I'm not backing out. I cannot tell you how the closing has been, like, how much it's helped my relationship, because we'll be in the middle of it. We're realizing, okay, we're not getting anywhere. Taking a step back. In the middle of it, it's like,
right.
Okay, we need to take a couple of minutes. We need to table this until, a little bit later. Let's eat something because we're both
you might be in that
hangry.
escalation spiral as well that we talked about previously.
Exactly, and that's like, I feel like so many people get into something and they're like, well, fuck it, I'm here. And it's like, sometimes yes,
right,
but most of the time, like if you just like be like, okay, even just a pause, like
and actually, I was gonna actually suggest, I was going to talk about this because if you've ever seen the TV show How I Met Your Mother, one of the couples in it, like the main couple who was in as a couple for the majority of the show, Marshall and Lily, they have this thing where either one of them at any point can hit pause in the middle of an argument, and that there are like there's a I can't remember what specifically is happening, but I remember there's a specific incident where there's been all this stuff and both of them are really super pissed off with each other, and then they end up getting back together again, and like one of them says pause and they get to be like, hey, how are you? I've missed you. Like they get to connect. It doesn't negate, and it's like and then it's like pause, unpause. So it's like, okay, now like we're and obviously there has to be an agreement over that pause.
I'm ready to unpause.
Pause, yeah.
Are you ready to unpause?
Can we unpause now? And I think that is a very, as long as there is an agreement around the fact that you can do that, how you do that, it's done in a way that is like mindful of like, okay, I want to pause this because I don't feel like and a lot of time when you're wanting to close, focus on what you want and what you need. Like, I feel like I'm not responding the way that I want to right now. This is not how I want to talk to you. This is not how I want to communicate with you right now. I feel like I need a minute so that I can get myself centered back in myself again, so that I can actually talk constructively with you about this. That is very different to, I need a break from you right now because you're pissing me off. Like, very different.
And that might be the case. I mean, it's the amount of times like I've been like, you know what, I can't even listen. But that's the trigger. It's my unmet needs that are actually the things that are pulling the strings underneath it.
Absolutely. So you focusing on what's happening with you rather than, yes, they might be triggering them, but also focusing on what you're feeling, what's happening and what you're needing, because it may be that it's like it may be that you're in that situation where it's like, right now I don't like because of how I'm feeling about this, I don't want to resolve this because I'm just pissed off right now. And like that is a trigger to be like, hold on a second, this is someone I love, this is someone I care about. Of course I want to resolve this. If I'm in that space, there's something going on in me that means I'm not in a space which is conducive to this moving forward. And I want to be in that space. Give me a second. I just want to be able to go and take my time to be able to figure out how to get into that space.
Well, and actually you bring up a great point, because it's like, I think a lot of times we kind of get into the conditioning of lip service. Like, let me just get this over with. I'm just going to smooth it over. And then we have all these things that have compounded in that one situation. We haven't checked in to meet our needs prior to. We're coming in, depleted, and then our needs get impacted more and more and more. And then we come out and we're completely drained, and it takes so much to get back there. That little pause can be that quick little refuel right in the middle of it to actually facilitate some real resolution.
Yeah, rather than like bypassing it, rather than repressing it, because those are the two things that tend to happen. Either you're bypassing it or you're repressing it, like one of the two, or you're avoiding it, like distracting from it, like those sorts of things. And yeah, a lot of people do like they do nice rather than kind. They do I'm going to be polite and I'm going to say yes, but I'm not going to actually have the uncomfortable conversation, and in such a way that we can resolve the conversation so that neither of us are feeling uncomfortable anymore.
And I'll let you know something, if you don't resolve the conflict or what's going on, it will come back up. You may not realize it when it does. It may take a different form, but anything unresolved is going to create that. You need a seat. Yeah. That little niggle there.
Niggle monster.
And
just realized you were like, you need a seat. I'm like, no, not listener. You don't need a seat. She's talking to the niggle monster.
I'm talking to the niggle monster.
If you're not watching on the podcast, you're going to be like, what the hell is she talking about?
Sometimes I forget that a lot of people just listen to us on audio. Yeah. So, but it creates a layer. And then it's like, well, I think we talked about it in the last episode. Like if we... 2 episodes ago, the first one in the series, like if you don't clear something, then it becomes something to fuel the next time. So like maybe 2 years down the road, nothing happens, and then all of a sudden it kind of triggers that fight from 2 years, or that conflict from 2 years ago, and you're like, oh, well, this isn't even the first time this has happened, because it wasn't cleared. Like there are conflicts Claire and I have had that we're like, oh, remember that? And one of us will be like, No, I don't, because it got cleared and we never thought about it again. And it's like, oh yeah, we did have that conflict, didn't we?
It's so funny because it's so often our relationship is such a rich resource of content for our podcast, and so often we can't remember any of it because it's all been dealt with. It's like we'll be like, we must have had this come up. Surely, I'm sure we have. I just can't think of when, because there's nothing left unresolved. So it's like we've totally let it go, like fully let it go. So anyway, so that is option number 2. And it says sometimes it's needed, sometimes it's not, but it can be a helpful tool.
Who knows?
I've got no idea what that beeping noise is. Oh, it heard me and stopped. There we go. There we go, beeping noise.
She caught on.
Yeah. So she heard us, damn it. Okay, so tool number 3 is co-creating. And now this is... when you are resourced because you've been coping well, this is what in most constructive, supportive relationships we want to be doing. Because what we want to do is we want to be meeting our own needs. That's the coping piece. We then want to be honoring the needs of the other person in how we are approaching resolving it. We want to reconnect, because what tends to happen is when there's a conflict, a disconnect has happened. So go ahead.
Before we go on too far, would you also say that, you have to honor the needs of the needs of the other person, also the needs of the relationship that you're in?
I think that I think this entire tool is honoring the needs of the relationship, because you're trying to find ways of reconnecting and co-creating something that works for both of us, so both parties. So
by default,
by default it is, and that's the reason that both people need to be active in this. Like, it's about, what do I need, and taking care of my needs. It's about honoring the needs of the other person. It's about reconnecting. So it's like when you're in that moment of conflict, that reconnection can make such a difference. It's like that reminder that you're on the same team, that reminder. And that's how that, like, you literally could take that form. Like we're on the same side here. And one of the phrases that I always use is like, if it's a lose for you, it's not a win for me. Like, reminding somebody of that can be really good. It might just be like literally reaching out and like touching someone's hand, or like holding somebody's hand, like some form of connection, some sort of like, I want to resolve this. Anything like that, it's you kind of bringing you back together, because that conflict has created this little pop, like there's this little gap now between the two of you. What you can do to reduce that gap and get back to where you were is going to help, because it's that what tends to happen is in conflict is that the reason a conflict is happening is because somebody feels attacked. At some point, someone has felt attacked. And the response to that is either attack or defense. Those tend to be the only two options in most conflicts. And so what ends up happening is that when we're in attack, and normally what ends up happening is the attack or defense then creates a defensiveness in the other person. So we've got we're on opposite sides, and there's this kind of defend attack kind of mentality on both sides of it. What we want to do is we want to bring down those defenses. We want to bring down that feeling of, okay, we're on separate sides here, and remember that we're trying to create something together, and being able to be like, hey, I just want you to know, I'm on your side. We're on the same side here. I want to find something that works for both of us. That alone, defenses are going to come down.
Yeah, it does deflate the situation quite a bit to just to acknowledge what's present, and then
deflate the conflict.
To deflate the conflict, yes. To acknowledge what's present and just be that reminder can really just so many times think about when you get in those kind of conflicts, take a moment to be well, what's usually my reaction. Normally we have a default reaction to those things. And it's think if somebody was hey, just remember, I know this is tough right now. We need to figure some things out. And the whole point is that we want it to work for both of us. We want to be happy. We don't want to be in conflict. And sometimes it's hard to remember that when you're in the thick of it, in the trenches, to be I know this isn't what I want. I know this isn't what they want. Let's figure out what we want.
And doing that from the place of I'm on your side, versus remember that we're on the same side. It might there's a potential for that to be are you saying I'm not acting like I'm on your side? You know what I mean? In those moments where we're in conflict and we're looking to reconnect, make it about you. Make it about I'm on your side. I want to find something that works, because that's the thing, is that defensiveness is because the other person is being viewed as some form of an attack, or that they're being viewed on the other side. And what you want to do is if it's me and Serena, I can't really think of many situations where this has happened. It's just not really been something that's been present for us. But if it was, let's say, and I'd said something that Serena had felt was an attack, and so her defenses had come up, me saying to her, I love you, and I want to find a way of doing this that works for both of us. I'm on your side. If this is if it's a lose for you, it's not a win for me. I want to find a resolution to this that works for both of us. That is going to help her defenses come down against me. And yes, depending on your relationship, you might be able to do it from a we standpoint. But I think that in this situation, making it about I want to not disarm you, but I want you to realize that if there any perception of attack that has come from that in how we've communicated so far, I want to try and remove that perception of attack and actually just show you that I'm on your side.
Do you think that's because the we is the conflict is part we is part of the conflict, because the conflict is within the relationship?
I think the reason for that is because in the moment that we hit, we're a we generally, and in the moment of conflict we become to an I and a you. We're not on the we side, because there's the conflict is we're on different sides. And I think that basically what you're doing in that saying I'm coming is you're saying I'm coming back. I'm in a we space, and I'd love for you to come back to the we space with me. If you go, remember, we want this, there could be this feeling of oh, she's saying that I'm not on her side kind of thing. Oh, she's accusing, she's saying it's partially my fault and you might feel that. I'm not saying that, and that might be true. But I think that you saying, I want to be on the same side as you. I want you to know I care about you. I want to find a way of doing this that works for you as well as for me. It's not just I want this, so I need you to do what I want. Mm-hmm. It's I want to do something that works for you. And by doing that, I think that it removes some of the defensiveness.
That makes sense.
And then what you want to do is you want to identify what your shared outcomes are. So what is the shared outcome here? Now, sometimes it can be difficult to get to the shared outcome because we're so focused on our individual outcomes, which might seem in conflict.
I'm pissed. I don't know what I want.
Right. Well, it may be that the shared outcome is we want something that works for both of us. It can be as simple as that. So it's like, okay, here are the things that would work for me, and here are the things that you want. Like, what are the things that you want? What are the things that I want? Okay, so now, and the good thing is that once you kind of get to this point, it's about figuring out what we want, and recognizing that what we want is a preference for how we want to get our needs met. And if there's a conflict at the want level for the preference level, at that point, we can drop down to the need level and go, okay, this is about this need. What are the other ways I could get this need met? What are the other ways you could get that need met? Okay, this way of doing it would work for me and for you. Is that like, and you can figure it out together. It's about finding, and I think that that's one of the things is that so often we get the conflict is caused by a conflict in preference for the ways that each of us are going to get our needs met. And we get so attached to that preference that we forget to drop down to the need that's underneath it. And once we drop down to the need opens up options, because it's like, okay, I want to get my security need met right now. There's a whole host of different ways I could get my security need met. I'm trying to think of I'm trying to come up with an example off the top of my head. So it's like, I might, okay, I'm coming up with a really bad example here, but what's coming to mind is there's an episode of Grace and Frankie where they have a break-in, and Grace has a gun and Frankie is anti-gun. And it's that it becomes this huge conflict between the two of them, because both of them are seeking to get their security needs met. And having a gun is the thing that is the way that Grace wants to get her security need met. And not having a gun is the way that Frankie wants to get her security need met. So there's a conflict there. But once they figured out that actually what they wanted was what the need was, I would love for Grace and Frankie to be like, okay, so what is the need underneath this preference? I mean, that would have been kind of cool.
Oh, that sounds like it would be totally up Frankie's alley.
I can imagine Frankie doing this totally. But if you got basically what they figured out was that there was a way of Grace feeling security without having the gun. And so that was what basically, it was a very kind of a strange example, but it is an example where they actually figured out what the need was, and they realized that the preference wasn't the only way of getting the need met. There was a bunch of different ways of getting that need met, and they found a way of meeting the need that worked for both people.
And sometimes in those conversations, like Claire and I have had numerous conversations where it's like, oh, I didn't even think of that as a way to get that need met.
Right.
It's like, that actually works.
Yeah.
It may not have been the preference to begin with, but it's like, yeah, that feels good. Cool. Let's do that because it works for both of us.
And that's the thing, is that if you have I might have a preference of the way of getting my need met, but if my preference is going to compromise Serena's needs because of interconnectedness, it's actually going to compromise my needs too. So it might be my go-to, but it might not be the way that's going to meet my needs best either. I'd far rather come up with a different option that actually works for us both, because that creates more bond, more trust, more connection, blah, 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 blah.
And more resources to then meet your needs later on, because the amount of times you find something new and you're like, ooh, that's the new thing. And sometimes that becomes the preference. And it's like, actually, this feels good every time I do it. So this is my go-to now.
Right.
But if it doesn't work for Claire when I'm in relation with Claire, that's not going to be my preference for our relationship.
Right. So once you've identified these shared outcomes, the co-creating together is co-creating a solution that works for both of your needs, and really is about letting go of those kind of preferences. Not to say that you're going to be like just throwing them out, but it's like going, this is one of the options for the way I could get this need met. What is the need, or what are the needs that I'm trying to get met by doing this? And what are the other options that are available? And then having a conversation about figuring out a way of doing it that works for both people. So the final little bonus option, which doesn't really feel like a bonus.
Every time you say bonus, I'm kind of like...
But I'm going to be honest. This has been something that has been a game changer for me. Mm-hmm. And
Ditto.
It doesn't always feel good in the moment.
It doesn't even feel, it doesn't always feel good after the moment either, but sometimes it's what's completely necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've tried to do the coping and you've tried to do the co-creating and it is just not working because the other person isn't as committed to co-creating a shared outcome as you are. I think that's a lot of the time what it is. Or they are so committed to their preference that they're not willing to try to find an option that works for both people. And their outcome isn't something that works for both people. It's really something that works for them, and they want you to want it too. A lot of the times that when you're in this position, and you can come up against like barriers in these things where it's like, God, this feels tough. And that might be the time where you seek some professional help, where you go and see a couples therapist, or you come and see someone like me. I mean, I've worked with a lot of couples where it's like you get stuck because neither of you can see anything other than your perspective and your desire, and you need somebody else to go, well, what about this, and what about this, and what about this, and there's like different ways around it. So it's not to say that, oh, it hasn't worked the first time, that's it, game over. Mm-hmm. But if you are with somebody who is not committed to finding something that truly works for both people, then sometimes the conflict needs to be resolved by completing. And by completing, we don't mean completing the conflict. By completing, we mean completing the relationship. And this is not something that is really ever that easy to do, because if you have a significant relationship with somebody, of course there's a connection there, and of course there's going to be some feelings about doing this. And you're listening to somebody who has done this more times than she cares to mention, not because I've wanted to, but because I have realized that the person that I am engaging with is not seeking a mutually beneficial relationship, and a relationship which truly works for me as well as them. They are hoping that I will get on board with the relationship that they want. And that is sometimes, and the interesting thing is, sometimes you don't know that until a long time later, because it seems on the surface like it works for both people, because for a period of time you will have it's like, oh, that this works for both of us. Mm-hmm. And it's only then a little bit later, I remember I had a situation with somebody where I lived very close to them for a period of time, and I thought we had a mutually beneficial relationship until I moved somewhere else. And I realized that I was willing to make the effort to go to them, but they were never willing to make the effort to come to me, even though we had same circumstances in terms of like access to transport and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, this is not a reciprocal relationship here. This is a relationship which is a one-sided one. So in those times, it is okay to set boundaries and to say, with regret, with sadness, like, it doesn't feel like this is a relationship that's working for me anymore. And sometimes there are some times in which that completion takes an explicit form, where it can be like, actually, there's a communication around, this doesn't feel in alignment anymore. It just doesn't, whatever the communication is. There are some times in which that communication, actually, you're dealing with somebody who is never going to accept that as a response. And I've unfortunately been in those situations where it's like, I know that I can't, if I try and communicate this, all it's going to do is invite more
bullshit.
Well, yeah. I was going to like arguing, trying to prove, trying to challenge, trying to change my mind, or
it's gonna create more impact to your needs, basically.
And sometimes it's gonna actually cause impact to their needs. And it's like, I don't want to cause them any more pain, but I also don't want to put myself in this position anymore.
And sometimes with the completion aspect of it, with what Claire just said, like, it's hard when you complete a relationship, and it's not just like a in passing friend that you're like, actually, we're not in alignment. When you had a relationship with somebody and then you choose to complete it, and you're like, you put down your boundary, and I've been in this situation many times where the person keeps coming back, and sometimes it's immediately, sometimes it's like 2 years down the road, and it's like, no. And you get into the kind of human aspect, like, oh, well, maybe things are like, maybe things have changed. And sometimes that's true. But any time that I have completed a relationship and then I'm like, I mean, I can't actually think of a time where it's been completed because of a conflict. Like,
Right.
that's why the completion happened. And I've re-engaged because it's like, well, I feel bad. They've reached out to me. I want to be the bigger person. I want to blah, 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 blah. All of the things.
Or I want to give them a chance to see whether things have changed.
Yeah, you know, people can change,
Yes.
all of these things. And that can happen, but
I mean,
that
we
has
wouldn't
not-
be doing what we're doing right now if we didn't believe that was possible.
Right.
Like, we wouldn't be having this podcast. This wouldn't exist.
Exactly. And the
And-
reality is, a lot of times, like, anytime I have re-engaged, I have regretted it tenfold, because
Yeah.
the impact before, it was like, not only have you not learned, changed any of the things, you're continuing to impact. And then me holding that boundary, either not responding or responding with, like, this isn't a thing anymore. Like,
Yeah.
this is why we are no longer in relation, then impacts their needs. And then they go into their own thing. So it's like, once you complete something, I mean, please chime in on this, because I know there is nuance to it, but
And the thing about it is, again, it comes back to this thing that we were talking about, I think it was in the previous episode, where and there's a difference between you communicating that something doesn't work because of how they are behaving in a way that is compromising your needs. That is them experiencing the consequences of their actions. That's not you negatively impacting their needs. And a lot of the time people dance around other people's needs, where it's like, oh, I don't want to say anything because I don't want them to be upset. And it's like, but they're doing something that is repeatedly not okay, and you're taking the hit every single time. So yeah, I would say that, I mean, in our experience, there are a lot of people who do want to change. There are a lot of people who don't. There's a lot of people who are more committed to their keeping their lifestyle as it is, and their themselves as they are, than wanting to grow or learn and find different ways of doing things. In my experience, it is rare to find somebody who goes away, does their work, comes back and is like, I'm so sorry, I would really like to see whether this is possible. Because a lot of the time their needs have been, their value need has been compromised by the fact that the relationship has been completed, not because you've compromised it, because they've internalized that as being, there's something wrong with me, even though it was just a behavior, like a conflict in behavior, that one worked for one. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with, like, that doesn't say you're not good enough. It just means we're not a good, and that's the thing, a lot of the time people don't understand, we're just not a good fit as friends. We're just not a good fit as family members. We're just not a good fit as intimate relationship. We're not good fit as work colleagues. There's a difference between, we're not a good fit and there is something wrong with you. And a lot of the time, because of how our value needs compromised in our society, it's taken to be, there's something wrong with me. Very rarely do people really then put themselves in a position to be vulnerable, to be like, hey, I want to come back, because they think it's something that's wrong with them. And I mean, there's so many layers to this. Or they just, I mean, a lot of people, as a form of self-preservation, will go, well, this person's there's something wrong with this person because they weren't okay with the thing that I was doing. I know that there are people in my past who I have completed relationships with who believe it was because I did something that was not okay as far as the relationship is concerned. And it's like, and whether that's true or whether that's false, either it was that it was true and we're not a good fit because I do things differently to the way that they do things, or it was that maybe they didn't do things in a way that was constructive for both of us, and I just said, that's not okay with me.
My boundaries do not make me a bitch.
Absolutely.
Like, they don't make me a bad person. The fact I don't want to engage is my own, meeting my own needs.
Taking care of myself.
And
yeah.
it's so, especially, I'm not sure, like, I can only speak from my experience and my experience as a woman. Like, I feel like that's the go-to. Like, if it doesn't align with them, it's like, oh, she's being a bitch. Like,
or there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. Like, you're not being the bigger person.
Or you're not reasonable, or you're being selfish.
You want to throw away all of this.
Because I don't want you to walk all over me. Okay, if that's selfish to you, okay. And that's the thing, is that a lot of people, there's an internal dialogue that, and this is why we say there's a big difference between what happens consciously and subconsciously with needs, because a lot of the time our self image of who we see ourselves to be won't allow ourselves to be the quote unquote bad guy, and so our conscious brain creates a story about the situation that puts the other person in the wrong, whereas subconsciously there's a whole different ball game happening. Like there's a whole bunch of different things that are happening underneath the surface, and so often what we're doing is the conscious thing is like, because the conscious brain is trying to meet needs. It's like, oh look, but I'm a good person and I'm in the right because this is how I've always done it, or blah 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 blah, or that this is how friendship should work. Well, not if it compromises the other person.
Well,
but go ahead.
I had to say, one of the worst things is when somebody, like when you've completed a relationship and somebody comes back as if nothing fucking happened.
Yes.
And they're like, oh,
hey, how are you?
Hey, yeah, like just a random message. And it's like, no. And the thing is, like, if somebody comes back if I've completed a relationship and somebody comes back and like they take the apology blueprint and they're like, and this is what I'm doing to make sure this doesn't happen. These are the things that I've done. This is where I see that I played into this. Like, if somebody came to me, no matter what the relationship was, I'd be like, okay, like that is a sign of real change. But most of the time they come back in pretending nothing happened.
Yeah.
Or when there's any sort of resistance, then the defenses come up and it's like, oh, well, that now all of a sudden I'm in the wrong because I'm not responding or because I'm not engaging. But like,
it's interesting because I know I'm thinking about like times when I've been on the other side of it. Like, I mean, there are times when, because of my own unmet needs, no excuse, I was mean to people. Like when I was in my kind of like late teens, early 20s, and I have communicated. I've sent messages to ex-partners. I've sent messages to people I knew who I was just mean to in how I engage with them, to apologize and to take responsibility for what I've done, because that was what felt right for me. Now, the interesting thing about that was I didn't expect any relationship. Like, I wasn't doing that to try to engage a friendship or anything. I was just doing because it felt like the right thing to do.
To clear it from your own.
Yeah, but that's what's in alignment with who I want to be as a human being, is that if I fuck up and I do harm to somebody else, I want to reach out to them and say, hey, I'm so sorry, like, and let them know that I'm sorry about that. But it's interesting. I don't think I've ever done that expecting. I wouldn't expect a relationship from like any kind of relationship following that, because that's the consequences of the choices I made. And if somebody wanted to engage, I'd be open to it. But I think that's, again, a lot of that is sometimes that coming back is, I want to be back in relationship with you because it will meet my needs to do so. And there's not a mutual consideration for both. So, and you really do need to have a mutual consideration and a desire from both sides to have a relationship that is both respectful of where both people are having their needs met and both people's needs are being respected and valued within the context of the relationship, in order for it to be a constructive and supportive relationship. Otherwise, we end up with these kind of relationships where, and this is where this kind of can sometimes happen out the blue, where it's like one person's been putting in more of the effort for years and years and years and years and years and years, and the same dynamics over and over again, and it's not been dealt with, resentment is built, and then all of a sudden one day, over something seemingly small, bang,
fuck this,
it's done. And someone's like, "Whoa, how unreasonable!" They they ended this thing over. I mean, I had one which was over using a shower gel, like, because I'd said this was what was okay or not okay.
Remember that
story? And it's like, and I mean, I won't share it. We're already kind of over time, so I don't want to get into that. And I will share it another. And most people go like, you did that over a shower gel? I'm like, no, I did that because I was tired of someone compromising my boundaries, not listening to what I was saying and not prioritizing what was important to me. And and what happened was, I didn't end the relationship over it. I finally held the person accountable, and I just said, look, this is not okay. I need you to be prioritizing. Like, if I say something's important to me, it doesn't matter if you don't think it's important, but if it's important to me, if we are going to be in close relationship, I need you to respect that at the very least. And they didn't, and they ended the relationship. So it's like, and again, I was like, that was great for me, because I'm like, okay, if you are not willing to respect me and what is important to me and it wasn't just any old shower gel. I was doing a house sit. It belonged to the homeowners, and I didn't know whether it was important, like whether it was a fancy one that cost a lot of money or what have you. And I never use the homeowner stuff anyway when I do a house sit. So it was like, it was a thing for me. And I was like, no, this is not okay. And as I said, it was interesting, like knowing that me setting boundaries and me holding somebody accountable was enough to have them go, yeah, I don't. And it was so interesting because how they did it was like, oh, I'm just going to disappoint you again. I'm just going to let you down. And I'm like, well, if you're saying that's what you're going to do, bye. Like I still had feelings about it. I was emotional. I had to process how I felt about it because it was a close relationship at that time. But oh my goodness, yeah, I don't want someone around in my life who is not going to make the effort to try to find a way of doing things that work for both people.
Well, it's kind of funny. Oh, you did that over shower gel, and it's like it's those small things, and it's like, would it really happen over? And in some cases, there is those one-offs where it could have legitimately just been the shower gel that set it off. But if somebody's
this was time after time after time after time, and it was just, that was the one where I said, hold on, this is like, I need this to be different because this isn't working for me anymore.
And if they can't respect shower gel, they're certainly not going to respect like
that's the
bigger things.
Is it people like, oh god, you did that over shower gel? I'm like, no, they ended the relationship over shower gel because like it wasn't about the shower gel. It was about me saying, can you please not do this, and them going ahead and doing it anyway. And that was a pattern. And that was just the one where I was like, this is not my stuff. This is somebody else's stuff that I won't even use. And I've asked you not to use it, and you've gone ahead and done it anyway. That's not okay with me. I need you to, like, we need to address this. And me saying we need to address this was apparently enough to end a relationship, which is great because I don't want to have people like that close to me in my life. So
yeah, it took an element that you didn't have to do out of it.
Yeah, it was great.
And I want to say something like, if you're in a conflict and you find that somebody's coming to you and they're kind of giving a laundry list, or like with the shower gel, it wasn't the first time she had mentioned it. It probably wasn't the 2nd, 3rd, 15th, 27th, whatever it was. Take a step back and be like, oh gosh, did I really missed that so many times? Because I mean, something happened with my husband and I recently where we were talking about Christmas presents, and I went and ordered myself something on Amazon, and he's like, well, why did you order that? And I was like, because I wanted it. And he's like, well, you've never said you wanted that. I was like, oh yeah, this has been a thing I've been talking about for like years, and finally I was just like, no, I'm just going to do it for myself. And sometimes it's so like warming to see like the growth. And he was like, he goes, I'm so sorry I didn't listen well enough over the years to hear that this was something, because it was never like a sit down focused, I want this, or even saying it. But it was
the thing I'd like you to buy me for Christmas.
Right. It would be like a little drop here or there, or me talking about it. And it's like, I didn't hold it against him. Finally, I was like, no, actually, I want to do this for myself. So I'm going to do it. But just that little like, oh, wow, I missed that all of these years.
And that goes back to what we were talking about in the last episode, which is like step number 2, which is like, oh, I fucked up. Apology blueprint. Here's how I and so for example, like with that example, like I have notes in my phone for the people who are close to me in my life, and if they mention something, that goes in as a note, like as a thing to add that I might want to get them for a gift. That's something that could be adopted in that situation to avoid it happening again in the future. So while we don't all often, like, I don't think anyone really likes completing. Sometimes it is the greatest gift that you can give to yourself, because it is important to be in relationship with those who value you and your needs in the same way as you value them and theirs.
And what I had said at the beginning with the completion, like, it doesn't always feel good. And we talk about doing things that feel, like we like to feel good. Most people do. Sometimes there's a difference between feeling good and feeling in alignment with yourself and what actually meets your needs. Because all of the relationships I've had to complete, I'm one of those people, if I love you, I love you. Like, unless you do something to specifically like there are certain situations where I'm like, there's very little love in this or none at all. But it's like, it's still sad. There's still relationships that sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish that was still a thing.
Right.
And it's not worth my well-being to be in a toxic relationship.
Well, and I think that the key thing in this is like, it might not feel good to complete it, but does it feel worse to stay in the relationship? Mm-hmm. If it feels worse because of the compromise to your needs constantly, then that might be an indicator that it's time to complete, even if the thought of completing doesn't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it for today. Anything you want to
add? I'm good.
So that's it for our conflict series. I'm sure we'll have much more to say about these topics on future podcasts. Even if there's something we missed that you want us to talk about, reach out, let us know. But for now, I'll say thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll see you very, very soon. Remember, in the meantime, to take care. We're sending you lots of love. And between now and then, to continue to meet all of your own needs. Lots of love. Bye.
Bye, friends.
That's it for today.
If you like what you heard,
and would like to see some of Serena's awesome facial expressions,
check out the video podcast on YouTube.
And remember, if you find yourself in a conflict, it's helpful to use the tools of coping, closing, and co-creating in order to resolve it. And if those don't work, it might be time to consider completing.
Well, shit. It really is that simple.